how funny would it be if someone walked by, they see him singing to these dogs?
Because they're in an alley, you can see the street down there.
Gosh.
It's like walking by on your way home and you hear this beautiful song and you're like, oh, what the hell is going on
There's
there?
just a couple of dogs eating spaghetti.
Mm-hmm. I think Tony maybe is a little lonely.
Yeah, probably.
This is going to be a little bit different too, because the source material is not something that I could find a lot of information on, and that it is basically an air quotes original story done by Disney.
Right.
Because they kind of took elements of this source material story and incorporated it with previous original story that they had. So when it comes to source material, it's sort of half based on a short story called Happy Dan the Whistling Dog, which was published in Hearst's International combined with Cosmopolitan magazine. Yes, that is the entire title. In 1943 or 1945, I couldn't find the exact year. It was volume 118.
Wow.
That's literally all the information I got. I couldn't find it anywhere.
Yeah.
I could not find a single thing about it. They had this little thing on Google Books where it was like, oh, this is the book, but it wasn't there.
What?
So, I'm sorry, listeners. I did my best. But I can tell you a little bit about the author, whose name was Ward Green. He was born in Asheville, North Carolina in 1892. He went to the University of Tennessee, and he was a journalist. He worked on the Atlanta Journal, where he was an assistant sports editor. He worked the police beat and was a war correspondent. He was assigned to cover the Leo Frank trial, which inspired his first book, or one of his first books, Murder in the Deep South, which then was made into a film called They Won't Forget. He is best known for Lady and the Tramp, because Walt found his article/short story and really liked it and wanted to combine it with the material that they had already, which Sarah will take us through in a second, and actually commissioned him to write their version of Lady and the Tramp story. So there was a book before there was the movie, and Ward Green wrote that. And that's kind of what he's most well known for. He did pass away in 1956 in either London or Havana. I couldn't find a definite answer on that.
You know, either place would be okay.
Yeah.
Those sound like great places.
Mm-hmm. So why don't you take us through the Disney side of the origin of this?
For sure. So, the story side was brought up by Joe Grant, and he was part of the story department at the time.
I think we talked about him in the Dumbo episode.
Did we?
I believe so. I think he
forget?
was the one that brought the roll-a-book idea to Disney.
Oh, okay. Oh, I forgot all about that. Sharp memory. I love it. So anyway, he came up with the idea because he was inspired by his English Springer Spaniel Lady and how she was feeling left out because Joe just had a new baby. So that translated pretty well in Lady and the Tramp. Joe approached Walt with some sketches of Lady and had the story commissioned to start development through the late 30s, early 40s. What they were doing, Walt was kind of like...
There wasn't really a huge story there. There was too much material for a short, but not enough material for a full-length movie.
Right, and he kept feeling that she was too sweet. There was not enough drama, not enough action. So, that's where Dan... Yeah. Dan had a happy whistling dog. He comes in. And so they decided to merge them together. Walt decided that if Lady fell in love with a cynical dog, that would create drama. I don't know. I think the movie is still pretty sweet. But
There's not a huge amount of conflict in it.
Yeah. So Walt did end up buying the rights to the story for Dan, Happy Dan?
Happy Dan the Whistling Dog.
Oh, and that's so long.
I know. And then brought Green in to write it. And so Walt wanted the story to already exist before the movie came out so that audiences would know the story, which is kind of an unusual way to think about it. I'm looking at it from today's standard.
Yeah, today it's a little different, I think.
So Simon & Schuster published the first edition of Lady and the Tramp in 1953, and I actually have a bit of a excerpt from Walt Disney's introduction to that volume, which I thought I would read.
Do tell.
So he says, "We had forgotten one all-important thing. No person or family can ever completely own an animal. Any dog worth room and keep in a household has a life of his own. He's a dog, entitled to some natural animal life aside from being man's best friend and his most tolerant critic. It was when we ignored that we got into trouble story-wise and dog-wise." I'm skipping a bit. It was then that I came across Ward Green's raffish short story, Happy Dan the Whistling Dog. It seemed to me that Ward's roguish might be just the fellow for Lady. I lost no time in contacting Ward. He knew in a moment what ailed our precious lady, so we conferred and palavered and exchanged doggish anecdotes and family experiences involving our own pets.
That's really cute. Mm-hmm. Oh, I really like that.
Unfortunately, though, a lot of Joe Grant's ideas were used, but
he was not credited for them because he ended up leaving the studio. Mm-hmm. But his work was owned by the company, so they did keep it, and they used it for reference later on and repurposed it for their needs.
Yeah, in a lot of these studio situations, the artist doesn't own their own work. Anything that they really come up with on the job is the property of the studio and not themselves.
Right.
Which kind of sucks.
Which is sucky. But I was reading that Eric Goldberg, he was upset by this, and he decided that he wanted to give proper props to Grant. So apparently, we couldn't verify this, but apparently on the Platinum edition of Lady and the Tramp, there is, I think it's in the behind the story scenes, there's supposed to be a bit where he gives homage to it.
The story of Lady and the Tramp started in the late 1930s with the legendary Joe Grant.
It sounds wonderful.
And I just have a cute little story that I want to talk about. So, artist Erdman Penner spotted the live-action model for Tramp after it ran in front of his car across the road one night. He hunted it down in a pound, apparently just before it was about to be put down. That's so the story goes. And he rescued the dog and brought it to the studios where the puppy, it was like a year old, and a girl, became the live-action reference for Tramp. And then after she was done being a live-action reference, she went to live behind the scenes at Disneyland at the Disneyland Pony Farm with the Popes, who were a married couple who managed all the horses at Disneyland in their house on the behind-the-scenes property.
That is way too friggin' cute.
Adorable, right?
Too cute.
I love it.
Me too. I can't even.
But two dogs can find adventure and excitement.
They were trying different stuff, of course, during their process. I got lots of stuff of what they were going to do, and then they didn't do. Some interesting names for the Tramp. Did you hear of these?
I've heard a couple, but let's hear them.
He was considered to be Homer, which I think is hilarious.
That's
Homer?
such a terrible name. Sorry to anyone named Homer.
Yeah. Rags. Ew. Just makes you think of germs. And then Bozo.
Okay.
So, I mean, Tramp is the best option out of all of those.
Apparently Walt came up with the name Tramp.
Oh, did he?
I mean, this is one of the many, like, Walt loved this, Walt liked this. Walt came up with facts that are, like, everywhere, that are really hard to verify, so who knows. But I did read in my research that he came up with it.
Lovely. Lady was apparently supposed to only have one next-door neighbor named Hubert. But eventually they said, meh, let's get Jock and Trusty. And I think that was a great move because those two are the best. I love them. Mm-hmm. Aunt Sarah was originally supposed to be an overbearing mother-in-law.
That was in Joe Grant's story. She was his mother-in-law.
Eventually she was softened to be well-meaning, you know. But a bit of a busybody.
Still a bitch.
Yeah, still a bitch. Cy and Am were originally going to be called Nip and Tuck. Is that from the book? Or the short story?
Joe Grant's version.
Yeah? Okay, I didn't know. And I'm like, Nip and Tuck. I wonder why he chose those names.
I don't know. Apparently it was Peggy Lee who decided to call them Cy and Am.
That's weird. Did ladies' owners have names in the book? Or this, I keep saying book, story.
In Joe Grant's, they were Mr. and Mrs.
Just Mr. and Mrs. Okay, okay. Based on my Wikipediaing, they were originally going to be called Jim and Elizabeth Brown. Then they were considered to be Mr. and Mrs., like the story. Mm-hmm. And then they finally went with Jim, Dear, and Darling.
I like that because I like that it's sort of all from ladies' perspective.
Yeah, which is very neat.
They also have just a lovely, I mean, we'll get into it when we do the recap, but
They're so damn cute.
Early, like the couples in Disney who aren't necessarily the focus, like we'll see it again in 101 Dalmatians. They're just so adorable.
Roger and Anita, they're my goals. I love them.
Like these couples just have such great relationships, the ones that are kind of on the fringe edges of the story.
Yeah.
Hearts.
Oh, this is cool. To maintain the dog perspective, the owner's faces were rarely shown. And I didn't really think too much about that as a kid, but they don't really show it much, do they?
No, I think I was noticing it, and we only get a real full body shot when we look in the nursery during La La Lu.
Yeah.
We see the two of them at the end when we pan out. We see Darling when we go in. And then at the end, or at one point when Jim Deere goes to open the door, he like looks back and we see him fully.
Yeah.
But most of the time we maybe get a quick profile, or it's usually cut off at their either knees or shoulders, depending on where they are.
Right. And that's crazy. Now watching as a doll, I was much more aware of it. I'm like, where are these ghost people? Like,
well, even just when we see rooms, we generally don't see anything above like halfway up the wall too, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, no kidding. Apparently the rat was supposed to be a lot more cartoonish. Yeah, I wonder if they're maybe gonna give him personality or something along those lines, but later on they decided to make him just frightening.
He's pretty scary.
Yeah, he's so scary. Yeah, and that was just to add more tension. I mean, if they started giving him personality, that would defeat his menace.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. There was apparently supposed to be a scene after Trusty says everyone knows the dog's best friend is a human, where Tramp counters him. Like, he basically says that, oh no, dogs are the masters of humans, and
I question whether my dog or me is the master every other day. So.
I think most of us do question that. Oh, this one is crazy. I didn't know this one, like, no idea.
Okay, I'm excited.
So, there was supposed to be a love triangle between Lady the Tramp and a Russian wolfhound named Boris.
Oh, we see Boris!
He made the final cut. He is in the pound, and he is... I can't imagine that.
He seems old for Lady.
I know. You just picture, like, this old gray scholar, and you're like...
Yeah.
Oh.
Like a sugar daddy type thing going on.
Yeah.
All right.
I'm okay if they didn't go with that, but
yeah.
I had no idea. That's pretty interesting.
Oh, Jim dear. It's the one I was admiring, isn't it?
Oh, do you want to talk about the hat box?
Yes, the hat box. So this is a fairly well-known detail.
I didn't know.
You didn't know?
I don't think I knew. Maybe I knew, but I forgot.
You had to know. Apparently, this was kind of the moment that is credited in some cases for re-kickstarting the progress on the movie, because it had kind of flatlined. Walt had accidentally blown off his wife for dinner, and she was kind of not thrilled with him. So to make up for it, he gave her a puppy, and he put the puppy in a hat box, and then gave it to her that way. And then that inspired the opening scene of how Lady is presented to Darling.
That is so freaking cute. I love it.
I mean, like...
As long as it's not too long.
Yeah, I have safety issues with that.
No, I understand, but holy moly.
It's pretty cute.
So cute.
The dog was not a Cocker Spaniel, though. I believe it was a Chow.
Yeah, I think it was a Chow.
So you did know this.
Well, after our Wikipedia did. I think you misunderstand my knowledge of many things. It's limited. I think that's all I've really got for that.
Now, Lassie, get on with the details.
So, obviously, as we already mentioned, live action dogs, blah, blah, blah. I love that. I love that they reference things from, like, live action. They bring things in, puppies.
I have to say that watching, particularly Tramp, there was a lot of stuff that I was like, yeah, that's what my dog does when he's upset. Or, like, they got that attitude bang on.
Right. Apparently, the spaghetti scene was almost cut due to Walt thinking it was more silly than romantic, which is crazy because I don't know about you, but I think it's pretty darn romantic.
It's pretty sweet.
Pretty sweet. And we have to owe thanks to Frank Thomas, who disagreed with Disney. He's like, no. So, this guy, he went and animated the entire scene by himself. All of it. That's crazy. Without any layouts. And that's people who place the animation where it's supposed to go and blah, 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 blah. But that's a big feat.
That sounds like a lot of work.
Yeah. But he did it. And ultimately, Walt was impressed. So it stayed in. And he thought it was very romantic now.
Frank Thomas fan club.
Frank Thomas fan club. He's a cool dude. Also, when the animators viewed the scene for the first time, they thought it should be slower. So what they had this poor apprentice do, an apprentice trainee, so like super new, was to go through and make half numbers between the original frames. So quickly, keyframes are numbered, so they're different moves. So if you put your hand up in the air, that's pose 1. Pose 2, hand down by your side. Pose 3, I don't know, muscle arm, curl up.
She's demonstrating all of this for me live, just so you know.
Just for your benefit, yours. So what this poor fellow had to do, I assume fellow could be a lady, I'm sorry, I don't know. They would have to go in between the poses. So pose 1 to pose 2, they'd have to put a pose in the middle now. So arm up to arm down to your side, there would be another pose in there. So it's a lot of work again. And these have to be super detailed drawings, have to be very on point, because you want to slow it down so that everything just looks the same. Because keyframes are the part that you really see. Like if there's an important expression, that's a keyframe. In-betweens, they could almost be fudged. Like they're very minimal detail, usually quick moving and stuff like that. But now, since they're slowing everything down, it's just a lot more goes into it.
I feel like if I was that assistant trainee, I would be super stoked when I first got this job, being like, yes, a chance to prove myself, and they have faith in my competence of drawing this. And then it'd be like a day later, I'd be like, why
I hate my
life?
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure they weren't quite up to the same level as Mr. Frank Thomas, but, you know, I'm sure they gave their very best.
I would hope so.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this is really cool, too. I love this. I thought this was amazing. So, we were talking about it earlier, about how, what was his name? Where did it go? He built the models. Where's the models? That's what I was super excited about. I thought I saw it, and then it wasn't there. Anyways.
Someone built
Forget
models.
that. Someone built models. Created these wonderful models. I think maybe...
Maquettes?
No, not even maquettes. Like, actual, like, structures of a house.
Whoa.
Yeah, like miniature houses. And so what he would do is he would take pictures at a low angle to get the dog's perspective. And he would film as well as reference. So you would always know what it would look like from that level.
That's cool.
Did you know our girl, Mary Blair, was originally supposed to be doing this?
I heard.
Yeah, and then she didn't. She was leaving at that time to go do her children's books and her personal projects, which is too bad. But we were introduced to Claude Coates, who stepped up, and he was the key background artist. Oh, it was him. Oh, there's my notes. I'm just ridiculous, you guys. He was the one. Claude Coates did the models for the interior of the house and shot photos and films at a low perspective for reference. I love it. I love how good they are with reference. Oh, I don't know how to say this. I don't know how to do names, but I'll try. Eyvid, E-Y-V-I-T, Eyvid Earl.
Eyvid Earl.
He did about 50 miniature concept sketches for the Bella Noche scene. That's so many. He was a super important person to the film. He then later went on to be the art director for Sleeping Beauty. Yes. Another interesting thing was this was the first animated film to be done in CinemaScope. CinemaScope. And I was telling Aly that this reminded me of Hairspray because Brittany Snow goes, CinemaScope! And it's in my head forever. I can't get it out. So, they decided to do CinemaScope because there was a growing interest of widescreen films among moviegoers. So they're like, heck, let's do this because we're innovative. Yeah. So, of course, this created problems for the animators. They had to widen the perspective now. So they had to figure out new ways for layout, where things go. It was an expansion of space, which created more realism, but there's less close-ups and things like that. So it was new. And I mean, of course.
They're trying to figure out how to work with it. I read that they had to make groups more spread out, like more space between characters. Otherwise, they were all like huddled in the middle of the screen.
Exactly. That's it. Thank you. That's exactly what I'm trying to say. They had to learn how to reposition things so that there was enough space but still create closeness, and ugh.
There weren't empty borders.
Exactly. So now it was really difficult too to figure out how to do that when there was a single character on screen. And we know now you put things on thirds and that helps, but this was all new ground for them. Oh, and now the animators also had to think a little bit differently in that their characters were moving across backgrounds, whereas before backgrounds were moving underneath them. So it's different now, and that's how it's done today, which is, I think, easier, but that could be just me. So not only did CinemaScope cause a problem for the artists, it was a bit of a problem for the theaters and Walt, because not all of the theaters were equipped to show CinemaScope at the time.
You think they would have learned this from the whole
From
Fantasound?
Yeah, but they didn't. So they decided to make two versions of the film, one widescreen and another in Academy ratio. 4:3.
And I know that people do this all the time now, but at the time that must have been infuriating.
I bet it would have been quite annoying. Yeah. So then this way they did this one too, since they had two different versions, there was a lot of extra work.
Come to join the party.
We have quite a few Disney favorites, or people who are going to become Disney favorites, starting with Miss Barbara Luddy, who was the voice of Lady. I love her voice. I think it's so...
Very classy.
And she was a radio actress, which is, of course, very common at this time. And she will go on to be Merryweather in Sleeping Beauty. She'll be Kanga in the Winnie the Pooh movies.
What?
And she'll be Mother Rabbit in Robin Hood. Larry Roberts was the voice of Tramp, who was a well-known LA theater actor, and in my opinion sounds a lot like Gene Kelly.
I'd very much like to know whose hospitality I'm enjoying.
And it's all ours for the taking, Pidge.
Right.
This is his only film credit, I believe, though.
Oh.
Bill Thompson is back, aka White Rabbit and Mr. Smee, and he does a lot of voices in this movie. Apparently, accents are a thing that this man is good at, and yes, we see a lot of them in this movie.
I think we got everyone in here.
Yep, lots of stereotypical representation.
We'll get to that.
So Bill Thompson did the voice of Jock. He did the voice of Joe, the voice of the Bulldog, the voice of Doxy, the German wiener dog.
Oh.
And the voice of the Irish policeman.
Oh.
And you can definitely hear it, particularly with the Bulldog and Jock. I can pick it out that it's him for sure.
Really? I definitely heard the policeman. I was like, that sounds like me.
Yeah, and then we see Verna Felton back. We've seen her in pretty much every movie for the past little while.
She's wonderful, though.
She is wonderful. So she was Aunt Sarah in this one. And I think this is nearing the end of Verna Felton's time with Disney. I don't know how many more movies she has left with them.
I'm not sure.
Alan Reed was Boris the Russian Wolfhound, and he was the voice of Fred Flintstone.
Oh, really? Ah, look at that.
We see Thurl Ravenscroft was Al the alligator and one of the singing dogs, and I mentioned him, not that he had a big part in this, but he was Tony the Tiger for Frosted Flakes, I believe. And he's also does the singing in Haunted Mansion. He's the one that looks like Walt Disney for the singing busts that everyone thinks is Walt Disney, but it's not. It's Thurl Ravenscroft. He's got that beautiful, deep voice.
Yes.
And my favorite person in this movie, Miss Peggy Lee. Peggy Lee, fabulous singer. She did the voice of Peg, Darling, Cy, and Am, and her son did the voice of Jim Dear.
Really?
Nope, sorry. Verna Felton's son did the voice of Jim Dear. That's what it was. But Peggy Lee did quite a few characters in this. She also co-wrote 5 songs with Sonny Burke. So she's a writer for most of the music in this, including Bella Nota and the Siamese Cat song. And she sang 3 of the songs.
Wow. Go.
And she played the character Peg, who was actually originally called Mommy or Mame after President Eisenhower's wife.
Mamie Eisenhower.
Because she had bangs that were apparently very iconic, but they worried that they would insult the First Lady, so they called...
Calling her a dog.
Yeah, so they called her Peg, and Peggy Lee was very excited about that.
I'm telling you, the pressure's really on.
She also sued Disney in 1988 for breach of contract, claiming she had the right to video transcriptions of the music and that VHS counted, even though VHS technology hadn't existed when they had made the contracts with her. But they hadn't updated the contracts to reflect the new technology. So she said that she only gave permission to use her voice and songs for the original film and soundtrack recordings, and not on home release.
That's interesting. So what happened?
She won $2.3 million in 1991
Oh,
after a very long court battle, and it definitely impacted the way that Disney did talent contracts. So their contracts with the voice actors and stuff like that.
No kidding.
And apparently there was an incident on a radio show in 1987 where she was talking about recording the Siamese Cat song. She did a lot of press for this movie as well, as I was reading. Like, she definitely publicized the hell out of it.
Wow.
They played the Siamese Cat song, and it wasn't her singing. And apparently she was worried that it was bootleg, but it wasn't. It was another LP that had Robbie Lester, I'm not sure which, singing the song because they were worried about the contract. So they basically, without telling her, had someone else sing her song.
Oh, okay.
And then they released that multiple times.
Ooh, uh-oh.
Yeah, so she was pretty pissed about that. And Disney's product manager did apologize to her, but that was kind of what kickstarted her
The
suing
snowball
them.
going, yeah. Oh,
she was
gosh.
very displeased with that.
Yeah.
So, which I think is kind of, it's an important case for artists because, like, she stuck up for her guns. She was like, no, you're releasing it. You're making all this money on this VHS tape release. That's
This is
my
mine.
work. So,
Yeah, yeah.
I always think it's important for artists to kind of stick up for what they're doing. And then as we get new technology, especially as there's a whole thing with actors now with internet ads and stuff, when you're filming stuff for that, it's not really reflected in contracts yet. So there's a lot of people talking about that. As technology changes, it can get a little slow to update things.
Yeah, I guess everything takes a little time.
So go Peggy Lee. I'm glad you did that. Way to stand up for yourself.
Yeah, you go, girl.
And I'm glad that Disney ended up paying her and that they reconsidered the way that they did things as well. I think that's important.
I think so, too.
Everybody knows a dog's best friend is a human.
So this movie premiered June 22nd, 1955, which is weird to me because it starts and ends at Christmas.
Yeah.
But cool. Let's release it in
that's
June.
fine.
Why not? It made the most of any Disney picture since Snow White.
Really?
Yep,
Oh,
$7.5
cool.
million.
Wow, that's great. Everyone loves talking dogs.
Yep. Putting cute animals in your set.
Done.
It was re-released in the theater multiple times, and it was released on VHS in 1987 and then again in 98, so that's again when we see the lawsuit happened. It was released on DVD in 1999 and 2006, and Blu-ray was in 2012.
Okay.
It had many favorable reviews, although there were some people who criticized the way the dogs were animated, saying that they were very clunky.
What?
I didn't really notice that at all.
No.
I thought they were quite well done.
Yeah, me too.
Whatever.
Obviously, they've never animated dogs before. It's not easy.
And it was nominated for Best Animated Film at the BAFTAs.
Oh.
It did not win, but it was nominated, which
Oh,
is
that's
pretty
great.
cool.
Yeah.
There's a great big hunk of world down there.
I mean, there's not a whole lot here. We had a Scamp, which is Lady and the Tramp's son. He had a comic strip, which ran from 1955 to 1988,
Wow, I didn't know that.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It was in newspapers and circulated. And then we have Lady and the Tramp 2, Scamp's Adventure, which was released in 2001, in which Scamp wants to be a wild dog and be free, so he runs away and joins a bunch of junkyard dogs.
Right. I remember that one.
I haven't seen it, but
I remember thinking it was okay, but I probably haven't seen it since 2001, so.
And then, as far as its presence in the world of Disney, you can see plush of Lady and the Tramp and occasional t-shirts and stuff like that. Like, it does exist, but it's not pushed a lot.
No, I think plush really is the big market for them. You always get the little kid who's like animal obsessed. Always go for those too.
And I think that you see a little bit of, like, statuettes and stuff of the Bella Notte scene, and, like, there's a
couple
bit
of
of that
ornaments and-
romanticism attached to it. It does, however, make its presence known, particularly in the Disney parks in the Main Street area, because we were talking about this as we watched it. The Main Street area is dated around the same time as Lady and the Tramp is set, so sort of turn of the century Edwardian era.
Right.
So it's kind of, if you're wondering what it would be like to live in the time of Lady and the Tramp, go walk down Main Street.
And it's wonderful.
It's
I
wonderful.
love Main Street.
But I'm going to take a little bit of a sidetrack here and talk about one of my favorite places in Walt Disney World, because I'm a huge nerd and I love food.
Please. I'd love to hear it.
There is a restaurant in Walt Disney World in the main square of Main Street in Magic Kingdom Park called Tony's Town Square Restaurant. And it's all Lady and the Tramp themed. And it's kind of this beautiful Edwardian restaurant where there's a little patio where if you sit out there, you can watch what's happening in the Main Street Square.
Is that the one with the white chairs and stuff?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I've been there.
No, you haven't been to Walt Disney World.
Oh, just kidding.
So this is literally when you walk into Magic Kingdom and Walt Disney World. It's on your right. It's really beautiful. And when you go inside, there's lots of theming. There's a fountain in the middle that's Lady and the Tramp. There's pictures on the walls. If you go out to like a window in the back, you can look out and you can see the alleyway with Lady and the Tramp eating spaghetti.
That's really cute.
And in the front, if it's not covered by strollers, they have the little heart in the pavement with the 2 paw prints.
What?
Yeah,
Oh,
it's
God.
super cute. But, ladies and gentlemen, they have the most amazing dessert ever. It's pistachio creme brulee.
Oh, that sounds great.
It's so good. But that's kind of the only place that you can really find Lady and the Tramp. All right, well, that is all for today.
That's it.
Goodbye.